I've got a new deck tech for you today, and this one is currently the most popular commander for Modern Horizons 2, but for good reason. It's Chatterfang Squirrel General. So this card, it's awesome not only for the meme value, but also just it's a very powerful card too. So it's a 3-mana, 3/3 legendary Squirrel Warrior. So we're playing a Squirrel tribal deck here. Let's see what the card does though. It has Forest Walk. Probably the least relevant part of text on the card, but still pretty relevant actually. If one or more tokens would be created under your control, those tokens plus that many 1/1 green squirrel creature tokens are created instead. So whenever you create a token, you get that token plus a squirrel. Notably, it's any token, not just a creature token, so if you make like a treasure or something, you get a treasure and a squirrel. Also, though, you can pay black, sacrifice X squirrels, target creature gets plus X minus X until end of turn. So usually what I've ended up using this for is as a removal, so I'll sacrifice X squirrels, give something, minus whatever toughness until end of turn, but you can also use it to give a creature plus more power. You can do that at instant speed also, so definitely that could be relevant too if you want to power up one of your creatures. So this deck is a green-black, go-wide tokens deck with also a bit of a sacrifice theme. And as I was making it, I actually noticed that there were a lot of cards that it had in common with my Dina deck. And I was thinking, oh man, am I going to have to get, buy extra copies of these cards? But the solution I came up with was actually to kind of store it in this deck box here and put it in the same sleeves as the Dina deck. So basically Chatterfang goes here, Dina goes here, and I'll just kind of sideboard in between the two cards and have it be like one mega deck kind of, because they are pretty similar. But now we're going to talk about Chatterfang. So starting off with the 1-drop creatures, playing green-black, so we're going to have some ramp creatures. We've got Elves of Deep Shadow and Birds of Paradise. Also, for a bit of ramp, there's Sakura-Tribe Elder. And then, since we're playing a sacrifice theme, we've got both Zulaport Cutthroat and Blood Artist. These do kind of the same thing, but they're a little bit different because Blood Artist triggers when any creature dies. Zulaport Cutthroat is only when your creatures die. However, this hits each opponent. Blood Artist targets an opponent. So, they've both got their ups and downs. And there's going to be a lot of cards in here that they're good for making tokens, but not specifically good for squirrels. Because like I mentioned earlier, Chatterfang works whenever you make any token. So one way you could approach this deck is to play lots of squirrel synergy things, but the way that I've approached it is to kind of maximize the amount of squirrel tokens I make through Chatterfang's ability, not through other cards that make squirrel tokens. So I'm playing lots of things like, for example, this Scute Swarm. It's landfall. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you create a 1/1 insect token. Then if you control 6 or more lands, you create a copy of this. So this is great for making tokens, not for making squirrel tokens, but just because this is great for making tokens, it also makes it squirrel tokens with Chatterfang. And there are a lot of cards that I could be playing that I'm not. Like, say for example, these cards from Modern Horizons 2. They're great squirrel cards, but like I did think about them and consider them, but I'm not playing them because I don't want to play a card just because it says squirrel on it. I feel like there are enough good cards. I should say enough better cards outside of just squirrel cards that make Chatterfang, I guess, a more competitive version of the deck that it can be. But, you can build it either way, right? So we've also got this Grismold, the Dreadsower. This card is really cool in this deck. I've won a game because of this guy. It's a 3-mana, 3/3 with Trample. At the beginning of your end step, each player creates a 1/1 plant token. Notably, it says each player, but so this is going to give you, a plant and a squirrel each turn if you have Chatterfang out. But also, whenever a creature token dies, put a 1/1 counter on Grismold, the Dreadsower. So that's when any player's creature token dies. So notably, also, the tokens that this makes for your opponents. But a lot of the time, what you're doing with Chatterfang is sacrificing a bunch of squirrels to try and kill something with this ability here. But when you do that, it grows Grismold. And Grismold does have Trample, so this can get really big and just kind of win the game on its own almost. This card is really cool in this deck, Emrakul's Evangel. I haven't seen it played in any other deck, but I think it works really well in this one. It's a 3/2 for 3. It says you can tap it and sacrifice it and any number of other non-Eldrazi creatures. Then you put a 3/2 colorless Eldrazi horror creature token onto the battlefield for each creature sacrificed this way. So basically, this is going to double all your tokens. So what you can do is say you have like 3 squirrel tokens, you could sacrifice this and your 3 squirrels. Then you're going to get 4 3/2 Eldrazi tokens plus 4 squirrels, so you get your squirrels back. So it's pretty cool. I see it as basically a token doubler, like a one-time use token doubler. Yawgmoth is in here, not for any token synergy, but basically it's just a really good card advantage engine, because since this is a go-wide token deck, with Yawgmoth we can pay a life and sacrifice another creature, put a -1/-1 counter on up to one target creature, and draw a card. So basically what we're doing with this is we want to just pay a life, sack a creature, draw a card is mainly what we're playing this for. Then you can also discard stuff and proliferate, but I think just with drawing the cards, this card is good enough to have in the deck. Here's a squirrel though, Toski. Toski is great for this deck, for any go-wide green deck. You know, it's indestructible, can't be countered. It attacks these combat, but that's fine. And whenever a creature we control deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. So since we're going wide, we should be able to draw a lot of cards off of this. Got a Pitiless Plunderer, going with the sacrifice theme. Whenever another creature we control dies, we create a treasure token. But if we have Chatterfang out, we create a treasure token and a squirrel token. And this is whenever any creature we control dies, so it works for tokens as well, which can be cool with sacrificing things for Chatterfang. Got this Mazirek in here. Flying 2/2, it's 5, it's a little bit much, but it's very powerful. Whenever a player sacrifices another permanent, put a +1/+1 counter on each creature we control. So this can make our stuff really big, really fast. If we sacrifice even just a few squirrels, you know, it's triggering each time for each one of those sacrifices, so we put a lot of counters on our things with this guy. Ohran Frostfang, this is one of my favorite cards from recent years. From the Commander 2019 decks, I believe. It does kind of the same thing as Toski, though. Whenever a creature we control deals combat damage to a player, draw a card, but also attacking creatures we control have Death Touch. So, you know, typically players could just block our creatures so we don't draw stuff, but this gives them Death Touch, so if they block them, you know, the block's probably not going to work out too well for them. I think this card is really cool. So for making some actual squirrel tokens outside of Chatterfang's ability, there's both Deranged Hermit and Deep Forest Hermit. Pretty similar cards. They both give us 4 squirrels when they come into play. They both give our squirrels +1/+1. Notably, this one says all squirrels. This is just our squirrels. This one has Echo. This one has Vanishing. Both very good in the deck, though. You know, there's basically an instant army in a can here. There's a bunch of big cards like this with the, you know, the Deranged Hermit, and then we're getting into these Tendershoot Dryad also. These are kind of our big token makers, I guess, they make us a lot of tokens. So with Tendershoot Dryad, at the beginning of each upkeep, create a 1/1 green sapling creature token. So, you know, it gives us every turn cycle we would get 4 saplings and probably also 4 squirrels from Chatterfang. Then if we have the City's Blessing, saplings get +2/+2 as well, but mainly we're playing this just to get a whole bunch of tokens. Same idea for Wolverine Riders. It does basically the same thing, except it makes elf warrior tokens. Also, whenever an elf enters the battlefield under our control, we gain life equal to its toughness. I believe this is the only elf thing in the deck, but we're just playing it to make a bunch of tokens. Also, the same idea with Beledros Witherbloom. This makes us a pest on each player's upkeep, so we get 4 pests per turn cycle. It also has the very powerful ability, pay 10 life, untap all lands we control, activate only once each turn. Beledros is a really popular card for Commander. It's also in the Dina deck. I feel like this is probably one of the best green-black cards you could be playing in Commander, really. Some more token making with Avenger of Zendikar. Should be familiar with this if you play Commander, I think, but when it enters the battlefield, we get a 0/1 plant for each land we control, and whenever a land enters the battlefield under our control, we put a +1/+1 counter on each plant we control. So this is a whole bunch of tokens in one card, even more when combined with Chatterfang. Going back to the sacrifice theme, though, we got Butcher of Malakir. So this is kind of like a Dictate of Erebos on a stick, right? So whenever Butcher of Malakir or another creature we control dies, each opponent sacrifices a creature. So since we're making a lot of creatures and we're sacrificing a lot of creatures, this works really well in the deck to make opponents just kind of sacrifice their whole board. And way on the top end, big boy himself, Craterhoof Behemoth. I mean, it's great in pretty much any green deck and Commander, I feel like, but especially in go-wide decks, so we're definitely playing this guy. That's it for the creatures. There are still some more cards that make tokens. That's it for the creatures proper, so let's move on to some spells here. Some ramp in Cultivate, Kodama's Reach, 3 visits, and Harvest Season. Harvest Season isn't one that you see in, all the green decks, but I like this card a lot. It's for 3 mana, sorcery, search your library for up to X basic land cards, where X is the number of tapped creatures you control. Put those cards onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle your library. So you can get a lot of lands into play with this card. I mean, even if you'd have just 2 tapped creatures, that's still, 2 lands for 3 mana. That's a really good rate, right? That's like a Cultivate, except it puts them both into play. But it just gets better from there. I mean, we could potentially be using this to get every basic land out of our deck, depending on how many tokens we have. But I feel like typically you'd get maybe anywhere between 2 and 4 lands with this, but for 3 mana, that's pretty great, I think. Here's a cool card in Fresh Meat. 4 mana instant. Put a 3/3 green beast creature token onto the battlefield. For each creature put into your graveyard from the battlefield each turn. So the way I like to think of this card is kind of another token replacer / doubler. Because since this is instant speed, what we can do is use Chatterfang's ability to sacrifice a bunch of squirrels to kill an opponent's creature, then play Fresh Meat to get all of those tokens back, as well as a 3/3 beast for each token we sacrificed. So, it's a really cool card to have at instant speed. It's also, like a board wipe protection. It does a lot of different things. Got a Heroic Intervention. Gives all of our permanents hexproof and indestructible till end of turn. Just another kind of a protection against board wipes and things like that. Plumb the Forbidden is a very cool card. It's also in the Dina deck. I think this card has become pretty popular, but I think it still hasn't even really, come close to its potential in Commander, because it's really powerful. For just 2 mana at instant speed, we draw a card and lose a life, but we can sacrifice any number of creatures, and for each creature we sacrifice, we copy the spell each time. So, in a go-wide deck like this, we could be drawing a lot of cards for just 2 mana, and then say if we have like Butcher of Malakir or something out, it just makes it so much better. I like this card a lot. Some potential card draw / kind of an overrun ability in Return of the Wild Speakers, another popular card for Commander. But we can draw a bunch of cards with the first ability. Or I feel like the second ability is actually more what I'm playing this for. Because +3/+3 is big in a go-wide deck, and at instant speed, it can make a big difference. Because probably, unless we have one of our big creatures out, like Craterhoof or Butcher or something, we might not be drawing that many cards off of this ability. But the second one, I think, is still quite powerful. But either way, it's a really flexible card to have. Second Harvest, another kind of token doubler. It literally does just double all of our tokens. So for 4 mana at instant speed, for each token you control, put a token onto the battlefield that's a copy of that. So, we double all of our tokens, but then we also get a squirrel for each token we've doubled, so it kind of triples our tokens. Scute Swarm, really cool. It's a 2 mana instant with Convoke and Buyback. All it does is put a Saproling into play. But if we have Chatterfang, it puts a Saproling and a Squirrel into play. But usually, almost all the time when you cast this, you want to be casting it with Buyback. So it would cost 5 mana, but it has Convoke, so you can potentially cast it for free. So it's just a way to, keep on rebuying this card and putting a whole bunch of Squirrels and Saprolings into play. Verdant Command is a new card. It's very flexible. It's not like big and splashy, but I think it does enough different things to warrant an inclusion for just 2 mana at instant speed. We can have target player, usually us, create 2 squirrel tokens, 4 if we have Chatterfang. We can counter a loyalty ability of a planeswalker, exile a card from a graveyard, or have a player gain 3 life. I feel like usually the modes I would choose are making squirrels and exiling something from a graveyard, because in a 4-player game, chances are at least one person is going to have something that they're going to want to use out of their graveyard or rebuy at some point. But even just for the squirrels at instant speed, it's just that with that one mode, it's still good. Got a bit of removal here in Hagra Mauling. This is the one with the land on the back of it. What else? Assassin's Trophy and removal for anything, right? Beast Within, removal for almost anything. Actually, yes, anything. Destroy target permanent. Feed the Swarm, removal for creatures and enchantments. And then this is kind of removal. Well, it is a removal, right? But it's kind of like a board wipe. It's a really big one though. For 8 mana, for each creature your opponents control, create a 4/4 green beast creature token. Each of those beasts fights a different one of those creatures. So if we have Chatterfang, we're getting those plus squirrels, but I see this as a board wipe that also gives us a whole bunch of creatures. Like, it's not necessarily a board wipe, because if the opponent has something that's bigger than a 4/4, their thing is just going to eat ours. But I think a lot of the times it will end up being kind of a board wipe that leaves you with a bunch of creatures, like a one-sided board wipe, right? Here's a not one-sided board wipe. Another one also, both Damnation and Toxic Deluge. Just kind of a catch-all backup plan, because we're the go wide deck. We want to have more creatures that are in opponents, but if things start to go wrong, we can just kind of reset the board with these. Playing 1 tutor here, Demonic Tutor. I don't want to play too many tutors in my decks because I feel like it kind of makes the games too much the same all the time, but I feel like playing at least 1 is fine, right? And some artifacts here. Not a lot of artifact ramp because we're playing green, so just Soul Ring and Arcane Signet, but we've got all the other green ramps, so I think that's fine. Chitter Spitter is a really cool card from Modern Horizons 2. 3 mana artifact. At the beginning of our upkeep, we can sacrifice a token, notably any token. If we do, put an acorn counter on this. Squirrels we control get +1/+1 for each acorn counter on Chitter Spitter. When we can pay green and tap this to make a 1/1 squirrel. So it does a lot of different stuff for 3 mana. So it's kind of like an anthem that grows, and it's also a repeatable source of making tokens. It's basically perfect for this deck, but I feel like that's what it was designed for, right? It's in the same set as Chatterfang with all the squirrel stuff. Another big kind of anthem here in Coat of Arms. Very popular one for Commander. Each creature gets +1/+1 for each other creature on the battlefield that shares at least 1 type with it. So this, like, a lot of the time when you play this, if you're playing any kind of tribal deck, this just instantly makes your entire board massive. This is a game ender right here, because even if you have like 4 squirrels in play, getting all your squirrels +4/+4 is really big. One thing to pay attention to with this though is it counts for opponent's creatures also. So if the opponent's playing a tribal deck, you might not necessarily want to just slam this. Eldrazi Monument though, this only works for your creatures. Creatures you control get +1/+1, flying and indestructible. Flying is I feel like almost the most relevant part of this, because if we're making a lot of creatures, but our opponent is still just walled up the board, they're not really doing that much for us, but we can just give them flying and still attack our opponents this way. At the beginning of our upkeep, we have to sacrifice a creature, and if we don't, we sacrifice this, but if we make so many tokens, it shouldn't be a problem. Idol of Oblivion, great card for any token deck. For just 2 mana, you can tap this and draw a card. Activate only if you made a token this turn, but I feel like we should be making a token pretty much every turn, so it's just tap, draw a card. Also, you can pay 8, tap, sacrifice this, make a 10/10 Eldrazi token. I've never done that. I feel like we're just playing this for the first ability, but if there ever is a situation where that matters, we can do it. Maskwood Nexus, really cool card. This is my pick for what I feel like will end up being potentially the most played card in Commander from Kaldheim, just because it goes in so many different decks, like any kind of tribal deck, right? But for 4 mana artifact, creatures we control are every creature type. This is the same for creatures we control that aren't on the battlefield. So, you know, in our deck, in our hand, graveyard, whatever. Pay 3, tap it, make a 2/2 blue shapeshifter. So, Squirrel basically, you know, tap, make a 2/2 Squirrel and a 1/1 Squirrel if we have Chatterfang out. But making everything into every creature type can matter a lot, right? Like, say, what if you have, you know, Coat of Arms out? That's going to make your stuff huge. And it makes all of your creatures into squirrels, so they get buffed from Chitter Spitter. It allows you to sacrifice any creature you have to Chatterfang, because that can only sacrifice squirrels. It just plays a lot of different roles in this deck as well as many other tribal decks. Got a Skull Clamp for some more card draw. Lightning Greaves, because this deck isn't like super focused around Chatterfang. Chatterfang does play like it's not a deck like, say, for example, Krenko or something, where the deck doesn't really work without the commander, because the deck can work without the commander, but at the same time, your opponents will want to remove Chatterfang. So we're playing Lightning Greaves. Just this one, not Swiftfoot Boots as well, but I feel like playing one of them is probably warrants a slot in the deck to protect our commander, and, you know, maybe protect something like a Butcher of Malakir or Beledros or something, right? Sword of Hearth and Home. I was originally playing Sword of the Animist until this got spoiled and I opened one. I feel like more often than not, this is kind of just a better version of Sword of the Animist, which is kind of nuts because Sword of the Animist is a really good card. But this gives a creature +2/+2, protection from green and white. Also, when the creature deals combat damage to a player, we can exile up to 1 creature we control, search our library for a basic land, then put both of those cards onto the battlefield. So the difference between this and Sword of the Animist is, well, the first bit, right? Sword of the Animist doesn't give protection from green and white. I believe it also only gives +1/+1. However, with Sword of the Animist, the creature only has to attack in order for it to trigger and you get to get a land. With this, it has to connect. So this doesn't necessarily always get you a land. But then it's also got the other ability where you essentially get to flicker one of your creatures, which is really big because it lets you to trigger any enter the battlefield ability another time. So I feel like probably I would play this over Sword of the Animist if I have the option to. Got an Awakening Zone. This gives us a 0/1 Eldrazi spawn each turn, so it can ramp us with being able to sacrifice those for colorless. And then also, it makes a token every turn, so if we have Chatterfang, we'll get a squirrel every turn. Bastion of Remembrance is kind of like an enchantment version of Blood Artist / Zulaport Cutthroat, but also when this enters the battlefield, we get a 1/1 soldier token. Beastmaster Ascension is a great way to make our creatures really big. I mean, since we're playing a go wide deck, this can get enough counters on it in just 1 attack, and then our things are instantly huge. Bitter Blossom is a great early play, just a way to ensure you're getting at least 1 token every turn. We do lose a life every turn, but I feel like that's fairly negligible in Commander. And we do have some ways to gain life as well. Got a Cryptolith right in here, because we're making a lot of creatures, so this turns basically all of our creatures into Birds of Paradise. Great way to ensure some ramp. Dictate of Erebos, because we're playing lots of... I feel like for every card I'm playing, it's saying because we're playing lots of creatures, but the same kind of idea as while we're playing Butcher of Malakir. It's basically the same ability. Playing Earthcraft. This does combo with Squirrel Nest. This is an infinite combo right here, because you enchant your land, you can make a squirrel. Oh, you have to enchant a basic land, but you tap your land, make a squirrel. Squirrel comes into play. You can use that squirrel to tap and then untap the land that has Earthcraft or Squirrel Nest on it, and then just rinse and repeat, right? Make infinite squirrels. But I don't really want to win that way. I'm not really a fan of just playing a 2-card combo. I would definitely play this if you want to, play the most competitive version of the deck you can. And Squirrel Nest is great for flavor as well, but outside of this combo, it's not really a great card. So I am playing just the Earthcraft though, because it's a great card on its own. just tap an untapped creature, untap target basic. So it's, you know, kind of similar, feels a similar kind of rule as a Cryptolith, right? Just kind of, it's a great ramp source and ensures that our mana is good. Doubling Season, because this is a token deck, so we're playing Doubling Season, right? Moldervine Reclamation. It's a pretty great card for any kind of go wide deck. Whenever a creature we control dies, we gain a life and draw a card. So this works for any creature, even if it's a token. Got a Sylvan Anthem. This card is really good, I think, for just 2 mana. Green creatures we control get +1/+1. So not necessarily every creature in our deck, but most of the creatures in our deck. And importantly, our squirrel tokens. But the second ability here is really good, I think. Whenever a green creature enters the battlefield under our control, we scry 1. So if we have like Doubling Season or something out, we could be making like 10 tokens and scrying 10 times. That's almost a tutor at that point. Sylvan Library, because we're playing green and we're playing commander, so we're playing this. I mean, it's just such a great card for card selection / advantage. Got a couple of planeswalkers here. I'm playing Grist. This is actually the most recent addition to the deck. I thought about it for a while, and I decided to include this guy because it is just 3 mana and it does do a lot. The passive ability is kind of not too relevant in this deck, and also more often than not, the +1 is just going to be +1, make an insect, and hopefully make a squirrel too if we have Chatterfang in play. And then for -2, we can just sacrifice a creature and destroy a creature or a planeswalker. So I feel like that alone is, you know, for just 3 mana is relevant enough to warrant playing this. But also one thing is, this does combo with Maskwood Nexus, because Maskwood Nexus makes all of our creatures that are not in play, so all of our creatures in our deck and graveyard, into insects, because they're every creature type. So if we have this in play and we +1 Grist, we can potentially be flipping over insects and triggering the Go Again ability with the +1. There's also this Garrett Cursed Huntsman. This is in here. It's a 6 mana, so kind of an expensive planeswalker, but this makes us 2/2 wolves every turn for just a 0 ability. So since we're making 2 tokens, we should get 2 squirrels as well. And then also it's a removal on a planeswalker. We can draw some cards as well. -6 could be relevant, definitely, which is, you know, quite good with you know, a go wide deck like we're playing. But all 3 of the abilities I think work quite well in this deck. So Garrick I think is a pretty good inclusion. There are 2 more planeswalkers that I think could work really well in this deck that I don't have in the list. And the reason that I don't have them in the list is because I don't own them, but if I did, I feel like I would be playing them. The first one is the Liliana Dreadhorde General. Mostly for her passive ability, it's whenever a creature you control dies, draw a card. So that just works so well with any kind of sacrifice / go wide deck. And the second one is the black planeswalker Tevesh Zot, I think it is, from Commander Legends. And the reason that would be good is because I believe it's +1, makes you 2 tokens. So if you have Chatterfang out, it's 2 tokens plus 2 squirrels. And the rest of the cards in here are just lands. Got a whole bunch of dual lands, some forests. Do have a Gaia's Cradle, because, like I've said for many other cards, because it's a go wide deck. But I mean, if you have a Gaia's Cradle, then play it. If you don't, don't blame me for not having one. Grim Backwoods. It's kind of I'm not super excited about this inclusion, but I feel like it is good enough to have in here because it's a colorless land, so that I'm not really a fan of that. But the ability to sacrifice a creature and draw a card on a land, I think, is powerful enough to be included in here. What else? Some more dual lands. Ohran Reef, the Vastwood. Comes into play tapped, so not a fan of that. It does tap for green, though. But also, we can tap this and put a 1/1 counter on each green creature that enters the battlefield this turn, which works really well for when we make squirrel tokens. I'm actually quite impressed with this card so far. It's been better than I thought that it would. Phyrexian Tower. We can sacrifice a creature to add black, so it's kind of, you know, similar to an Ancient Tomb, right? It's a land that can tap for 2 mana. Got some swamps, a Swarm Yard. This allows us to regenerate insects, rats, spiders, or squirrels. So squirrels, of course, are playing a squirrel deck. Insect could be relevant, I guess, because of Grist, right? But that can also, this also combos with, where is it? Maskwood Nexus. Yeah, there it is. So, you know, that's just another reason to be playing Maskwood Nexus. So it works well with Swarm Yard. Allows us to use this and regenerate any of our creatures. Some more duels. An Urborg. War Room. I like this card in any kind of, I guess, 2-color or less deck. We can pay 3 mana, tap this, and pay life equal to the number of colors in our commander's color identity. So 3 tap, pay 2, draw a card. Westvale Abbey is really cool. It's a land that we can use to make tokens, but then also we can tap this, pay 5, and sacrifice 5 creatures to flip this over into a 9/7 flying lifelink indestructible haste. So, you know, it's a land that comes into play untapped. It taps for colorless, which kind of sucks, but you know, not only does it allow us to create tokens with our land, it can also be a big flying threat. Got a Verdant Catacombs, another duel, and then new card, kind of the counterpart to Urborg, the Yavimaya. So now all of our lands can be swamps as well as forests. That's it for the deck, though. I've played it a couple times, and it's really powerful. Like this, like I said earlier, I feel like the appeal of this is that it's a meme card, but it is a real, like a legitimately powerful deck. So I think you could, like, this is the way I've built it isn't even the most powerful way possible. Like, I've tried to streamline it and not go too memey, but you could include things like, you know, Squirrel Nest if you want an infinite combo. But you could also kind of dial it back also and play more cards that go in on the Squirrel tribal synergy. Make it potentially more fun to play, depending on what you consider fun. But yeah, if you have any suggestions, I'd be happy to hear, or comments or anything like that. I typically read all the comments that people leave. But otherwise, if you're still watching, thanks for watching. It'd be cool if you can like and subscribe, and I'll talk to you later.